We're officially over a month into the new season, which has brought a lot of interesting surprises along the way, including being able to watch how the freshly drafted rookies are looking in their first stretch of real NBA basketball. The class of 2024 came in labeled as a relatively weak group by the masses, so what we're here to do today is to determine whether or not that's actually the case. Specifically, we'll be going through each of the top 10 picks made in the draft, and we'll be grading those selections 1 month into their careers, based on a combination of the value they're providing compared to where they were drafted, and how productive they are looking in their current roles. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting with the number 1 pick in the draft, which was Zachary Risacher of the Atlanta Hawks, the grade 1 month into his career is a B-. This year's class never had a clear-cut number 1 prospect, so ultimately Risacher became the pick for the sake of fit in Atlanta, and even though we all came in knowing this context, he was still the first name off the board, coming in with lofty expectations as any number 1 pick should have. Risacher has not been bad by any means, but nothing about his game at the moment is spectacular, and he's looking like a low-ceiling, high-floor kind of two-way role player. He's playing solid defense for a rookie, looking like someone who should be great on that end down the line, but offensively, the inconsistencies are much more prevalent. He's putting up a respectable 11.5 points per game, but he's not very efficient, shooting just 39% from the field and 26% from 3. He's had a few strong outings demonstrating his upside, including a 33-point game against the Knicks, but overall still has a ways to go to live up to the hype. Next up is Alex Sarr of the Washington Wizards, who was selected 2nd overall, and the grade 1 month in is a B. Sarr's standing at the moment is actually very similar to Risacher's in that he's shown some glimpses of high-end potential but lacks the consistency to bring the level of impact you would expect from a top pick. Sarr is an incredibly athletic 7-footer who also plays like a stretch big, comfortably spotting up from the 3-point line, but he too is still a ways away from producing in such on a night-to-night basis. He's averaging about 11 points and 6 rebounds per game, starting every game that he's played in so far, but he's also shooting just 38% from the field and 25% from 3. Inefficiency is of course nothing new for young rookies at the start of their careers, but for a big man you would definitely like to see him converting at a better rate. With that said though, the reason why he gets a slightly better grade than Risacher is because he's actually proving to immediately be a pretty strong rim protector, ranking in the top 5 of the NBA in blocks per game currently as a rookie. Next is 3rd pick Reed Sheppard of the Houston Rockets, and his grade 1 month in is a C-. Sheppard entered the season as one of the heavy favorites to win Rookie of the Year after an outstanding showing in the Summer League, but he has just not been able to consistently crack the team's rotation or carve out a role for himself on a night-to-night basis. The Rockets do admittedly have a pretty deep team, so minutes were always going to be hard to come by, but it's fair to say that Sheppard was at least expected to be an impactful bench player by most, and he is not yet there 1 month in. Sheppard has just 1 game where he has scored in double figures on the season as a whole, and he's averaging just 4 points, shooting 37% from the field and 36% from 3. And with the Rockets surprisingly keeping pace at the top of the Western Conference standings, it may continue to be difficult for him to work his way up in the pecking order. Next is 4th pick Stephon Castle of the San Antonio Spurs, and the grade here 1 month in is a B+. Castle came into the NBA fresh off of a March Madness title with UConn, where he wasn't necessarily a high-usage guy, but he fully bought into his role as a lockdown defender who consistently brought energy and impact on both ends of the floor. He's a strong-bodied guard whose game is still a bit raw, but already in his first month, he's exceeding expectations and looking very promising as an on-ball creator after not really getting to show much of that at UConn. He's averaging about 11.5 points per game, while also dishing out about 4 assists per game. He's taking care of the ball well, he competes hard, and he's playing some outstanding perimeter defense for a young Spurs squad. He too is struggling to score efficiently, as is most of the rest of this class, so in that regard the narrative of this draft as a whole being a bit mediocre is kind of holding water, but Castle is way ahead of the curve in most other aspects. Next is 5th pick Ron Holland of the Detroit Pistons, and the grade here, 1 month in, is a C. Holland came to the league from the G League Ignite program, where his skill set as a slasher and overall scorer were his calling card as a prospect, but he's another guy struggling to find consistent minutes game to game. Even as a prospect in the G League, his three-point shot was a bit worrisome, just like it still is now, with him making just 16% of his shots from deep. He's averaging just 6 points per game off the bench, and he still needs to get antiquated to this level of play because his feel for the game is holding him back a bit. Next is 6th pick Tajon Salon of the Charlotte Hornets, and the grade here, 1 month in, is another C. Salon was viewed as a raw project of a prospect, so nobody was necessarily expecting him to wow right out of the gate, but he is still very much someone who needs a few years before he can give you consistently good minutes on the wing. His start to the season was, to be honest, pretty bad. He has, however, been improving as of late, and with him starting a few games lately due to injuries to his teammates, he's coming off of a pretty solid 17-point performance where he knocked down 3 threes and generated 3 steals, so there's clearly talent there. It just needs to be honed in a bit more. Next up is 7th pick Donovan Clingan of the Portland Trail Blazers, and the grade here, 1 month in for him, is an A-. Clingan's numbers may not jump off the page at you, but he's the kind of player who has genuinely been getting better and better with each passing game, and his work as a defensive anchor is genuinely elite already. The Blazers slowly worked him into action at the start of the season, but he's now claimed their starting spot in each of the last 6 appearances he's made, and for a young Blazers squad in the rebuild phase, they can confidently tie their defensive identity to his work inside. He's averaging just 17 minutes per game, yet he ranks 3rd in the entire NBA in blocks per game right now. He's grabbing about 7 rebounds per game on top of that, and even though he's only putting up about 6 points per game, he's sticking to his role and converting when the opportunities present itself. Next up is 8th pick Rob Dillingham of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the grade 1 month in is a C+. Dillingham is in a much more difficult position than most of the other rookies we've discussed today, in that he was drafted by a contender with their focus fully on winning at the highest level. Teams like that typically don't have the same amount of patience to develop an inexperienced rookie and let them play through their mistakes, which is pretty much exactly what's happening to Dillingham at the moment. For most of the season, he's barely even been able to crack the rotation and has only played 10 or more minutes in games twice, but in both of those games, he has scored in double figures, he shot the ball efficiently, and put pressure on defenses off the dribble, and he even dished out 7 assists in one of those 2 games. So while his time to shine may not have come yet, he still gets a slightly better grade than others with minimal production because of what he has shown in the few chances that he's been given. Next up is 9th pick Zach Edey of the Memphis Grizzlies, and the grade 1 month in here is an A. Edey has by far been the most consistent of the rookies that we will be discussing in this video, with only Jared McCain playing at a more consistent, solid level than him in the class overall. Edey plays a pretty steady 20 minutes a night, he's putting up about 11 points and 7 rebounds per game, he's shooting 61% from the field using his overwhelming size to finish around the rim with relative ease, and his presence alone makes it tough for opposing players to try to drive to the rim. He's not perfect by any means, but it's hard to argue against his consistent production being a big boost to a Grizzlies team bouncing back in a big way this season. And finally, last up is 10th pick Cody Williams of the Utah Jazz, and the grade here is an F. Not to be too harsh on the guy, but Williams has been one of the worst players in the entire NBA this year amongst the guys who are regular parts of their team's rotations. Williams has started 7 of the 16 games that he's played this year, but is averaging just 3 points per game, shooting an abysmal 27% from the field and 19% from 3. He struggles mightily to create with the ball in his hands, he's not a reliable spot-up shooter or cutter yet, and even defensively, he's been taken advantage of more often than not. To top it off, the Jazz have also performed 18.6 points worse per 100 possessions with him on the court versus when he's on the bench, so overall, it's been pretty disastrous for the 10th pick. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these rookies moving forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.